Morning to the executive. Nice to be back in meeting room one. It just feels a bit better, doesn't it? I think.
Yes.
Good. Got to be on the same level as everybody else as well. Okay then. So have we any apologies for absence, please? Rachel?
Apologies, it's the boot tried.
Thank you. Right. Any declaration of council interest, please? No. Thank you. So any announcements by legal chief executive councils and executive directors? I think just in terms of obviously the recent flooding since we've had since the last meeting, you want to just give a quick update in or somebody or
I think I've got the updated numbers
Yes,
in terms of what took place last week. So obviously it was geographically spread across the whole of the county. We had flooding incidents everywhere. Obviously the western side and the south of the county were worst affected. In terms of the numbers we've got to date, in terms of internals coming to properties, 124 further properties were flooded. In terms of external reporting, which is water up to the property but not inside it, a further 168. And in terms of land, 5. Interestingly, 38 properties that were flooded in Storm Babette were also flooded last week. So there's some issues going to quite clearly need to be looked at around those. And obviously these numbers are likely to go up, not down. There might be some duplication in the reporting, but we'll strip those out. It means in terms of, on top of Storm Babette, we now have a massive pile of investigations to undertake in relation to Section 19. And quite clearly, the land is still saturated. There are still some warnings in place, still issued along the Trent that we know about. And I suspect, as Richard will probably confirm, once the water subsides, we then find that the damage to infrastructure, riverbanks, etc., that we can't see at the moment. So, bear in mind, this was the second heavy, intense rainfall event in a matter of weeks. It is quite clear that this is going to be the pattern for the future. And we need to be prepared as much as we can be for that. And we need to make sure our partnership and our partners are doing everything they should be doing, working with us as we lead local flood authority to ensure that where we can mitigate, we can, and where we can build resilience, we do, as we look to the future. But it's going to be quite clearly a challenge in the years ahead, I would say, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, well, I think obviously as the lead flood authority, we have a responsibility to investigate certainly where there's been properties flooded, and obviously it doesn't necessarily mean that we have responsibility for if the problem's identified, sorting it out. Now, on the other hand, where ownership is uncertain, I think there is an onus of us that we do our best, but this is a massive problem, and I do think we ought to also in line with other partners in local government, right to government, because clearly the assets which we all which are being maintained probably does need more investment currently being put in. And I think there's an ongoing issue about all the flood defences where they've been in place for many years and probably the investment hasn't been in the existing asset as we would like, and this ongoing constant threat. So it's something I think we need to bear in mind, although we could argue as a council, it's not our direct responsibility, it's not a statutory responsibility. I do think we do have a moral responsibility to do what we can. We won't be able to solve every problem, do what we can in terms of trying to help residents, particularly those where there are issues which can be relatively quickly resolved. Obviously, major flood defence works is beyond our capabilities or financially or technically, but certainly where there's a lot going into that, we probably need to try and do more. We do a lot already, but do probably even more just to try and help resolve those issues.
I take all that on board, please, and we'll back to that. That's my director to prepare a letter to go to government on our behalf, making the point and see if there's anything we can do to influence the spring budget announcement in March, particularly in line with, bearing in mind we have responsibilities to investigate, but we've never been funded by government to undertake those investigations. And there are provisions within the Environment Act which have not been brought into force yet, which government should bring into force. That will give us more power of direction and enforcement. So I think there are some things that government could do to help themselves, because I don't think they've made adequate provision in terms of their various agencies, in terms of maintenance of assets over the last decade or so. And that really the problem is that the lack of money in maintenance of assets has caused some of these problems, I'm sure. So government needs to invest in that, and they need to focus their energies on the here and now, not in 20, 30 years' time. We need to start dealing with some of the problems that exist that we saw in first hand, particularly in your area, in the South Region. There are a lot of issues, and some of those can be dealt with fairly quickly. Some of those will be more big investment decisions. But agencies need to take their responsibilities, and they need to have a conversation with government like we will.
Yeah, and I think also this time the south and the west of the county seem to be worse hit. I think we've all seen the pictures of certainly, for example, villages near Stamford itself, and Gainsborough Way. So also I think there has been a general appreciation of the work that local fire service and indeed our highways assets and people have been actually doing, stepping in to try and help, where they can. And certainly there's been many parts of the county where the pumping we've done has saved many properties, and indeed the work that we've done previously in terms of investing in places like Louth, Castle and Lonbenton actually have worked. And I think we'll do all we can to make sure that these events are going to happen in the future, make sure that we are as prepared as we can be. But the truth of the matter is there's so much volume of water. Last Tuesday, for example, it was nothing you could do apart from make sure where the water overcharged from pipes and what have you, that at least it went into the fields and not into somebody's garden.
I think
it will happen more often. It's going to happen.
Yes. I think probably we should recognise and thank the emergency services who were working tirelessly last week to deal with some of these issues. But I would also suggest we also publicly say and thank all those people in local communities who were working themselves to protect their communities. Those parish councils that have emergency plans, they knew what to do, they were organised, and we should recognise that. And I think there is a piece of work to do to make sure that those that were not connected in the same way up their game, and that's possibly a conversation with LAUC or one of the other organisations about helping parishes where they exist. I mean, there's quite clearly a lot of areas that don't have parish councils, so we have to think about how those are reached. But we do need to help build community resilience. Because that's the best way of actually dealing with issues on the ground. In a major county-wide event like last weekend, such as the BET, resources are always going to be stretched. So the more we can get happening on the ground locally, organised at a local level, in community, that parish level, the better it will be for everyone long term.
And I think we will come to a future meeting of this executive with a plan as to what investment we can put into this, and also a plan as to how we can actually roll something over. It's not just a 1 year issue, it will be future years as well. Okay, any further comments, questions from member of the executive? Did you want to, sorry?
No, sorry.
Oh, right.
No, it was just that I saw Andy move his finger, but.
Oh, Andy moved his finger, right. Andy's there.
Just to bring the executive up to speed with the various grants and support that have been identified by government. There's a recovery grant which will be available to local authorities to the value of £500 per household to enable immediate recovery, immediate clean-up. And there are grants related to business rates and council tax. The conversations we're having with the districts, it's best for them to administer theirs because it ties into their existing systems. The area where we've potentially got a role is in respect of the flood resilience grants that are available for people to take responsibility of their own properties and be able to put extra defence mechanisms on their own properties. That's a grant of up to £5,000 per property. The problem with the grant from a viability point of view is that people have to get the works done and then reclaim the grants back. And it's in 2 stages. It's a grant for survey work to determine what might be possible to be done, and then further grant for the physical works. there is an issue there about whether that will be affordable for everyone that's directly affected. So once we've got a better understanding and feel of the number of people that might be applying for that, there may be ways in which we can help with sort of cash flowing some of that, if that's something that would be seen to be helpful and supportive for people. We're also talking to the LGA and CCN and the DEF about actually lobbying government to change the way that grant is actually administered, to take away the burden off the householders who are obviously experiencing fine. And there's also a farming recovery grant providing assistance up to £25,000 per farmer as well. Obviously, the scale of some of the impacts on the farming community, that probably won't go very far, but that's what's currently available from the government.
Thank you. Sorry, Wendy.
Yeah, can I just, the 5,000 recovery resilience grant, quite a few of my residents push into that.
Yeah.
Firstly, they have a response. Could we get somehow that when the email comes into county that it gets an automatic response? Because I've had question, oh, have they received it? Which I know we're inundated, I understand that, but it'd be just nice if they could just get that automatic response. We've received it, we'll to you. But also,
We're adding some additional resourcing as of today to help.
You're under pressure. But also about the actual giving of money. I've got certainly a couple that have actually had advance from different flood agencies. And they've got pricing for doors and for pumps.
Yeah.
And they're ready to go with actually, the buying of it. And they're willing actually to buy it and then put in for their money back.
Yeah.
But they've been told they can't do that. So we just really do need some information that's, what they can do and what they can't. Because these people do want to get these doors in quite quickly because they have been flooded twice now.
I know from a conversation yesterday, one of the problems is that in the context of the framework that the government wants us to use to supply the equipment for this, they've only got one accredited company in the East Midlands. So it may be a supply chain issue that it's actually causing a problem. So we'll try and pick that and come back to you.
Because that's what worries me, because they've got prices from a firm in Hull, really reasonable prices. They can get doors for 2,500, they can get pump for 500, which would alleviate their issues. Bearing in mind they've had 2 floods in the last 3 months, and it is just, do they just get on with it and try and claim it back? That's, it's, I know it's difficult, these questions.
I think the difficulty is that the rules for the system have been established by government. We need to find a pragmatic way to help people around that, because that particular constituent of yours, if they wanted to take efforts to address it, and in terms of what Colin's saying, this is going to happen again, they're trying to do it so they don't have that same problem again later this winter.
Yeah, and just quickly, can they claim that they would? I've got one person who was flooded in October. They claimed the 500. They've just been flooded again. Can they claim 500 again?
I believe so, but I'll double check.
I mean, obviously, I've been told, because some of my people said, well, we've tried to, because I've said, well, if you go onto the council website, it's all there. But, and I'm not sure whether it's because obviously the £500 is being distributed by the district councils, but they did say, well, there was a phone number, but nobody was answering it. So I'm just concerned that are we actually making sure that is somebody there just to answer it, even if it's to say, well, this is the rule, these are the rules as we understand it. So, and also we probably need to communicate to parish councils, etc., to just explain to them what the situation is, because it's all right. The government say, oh, well, there's £5,000 there, but it's not quite that. So I do think there's a communication issue here, both, but when people contact either via the website or try to ring, are they getting someone explaining what the system is?
Probably not. Hence why.
So I think there's quite an urgent issue about we need to via the call centre and indeed via what's coming in by email. We just need to put some resource in to get that sorted out, because obviously people are trying to get themselves sorted out, aren't they? It's bad enough being flooded, but then if you can't seem to work out what's what, because I think that certainly needs to do as a matter of urgency.
Yes, we'll follow that up.
Okay.
Can I
Yes.
just, because before when we've had incidents, we've had a team dedicated, say 3 or 4 people in the customer service centre who are dedicated to dealing with those calls. Have we not set anything It's just
That's the
everybody.
conversation we had first thing this morning.
Oh, right.
I'm sure that capacity has been created. So I'll follow up after this meeting.
Yeah.
I'm sure that. Big man.
So,
Okay, anybody else, please? Okay, thank you for that. So we move on then to item 4 for the minute of the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting held on this committee on the 5th of December 2023. Is your wish I sign these as a true and accurate record?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I will do so. That means then we can move on to the substantive item today, which is recommendations about the council budgets for 24-25. So today we will make a recommendation which will then go out to consultations. And
Thank you, Edie. Yes, we're very happy to bring the draft 2024-25 budget for discussion today. I'll just give some brief context before handing over to Michelle, as I normally do, for some further detail. So the paper has been prepared on the basis of a 3% council tax increase for next year. Compounding that through the years of the financial plan that we've got in the paper, that gives us a budget gap after 4 years of around about £15 million as it stands at the moment. I think the main point to feed into the meeting is that's predicated on a cut in funding at some point during that period of the plan to reflect the current profile of public expenditure reductions that non-protected government departments would expect to receive based on the current spending review profile. That's
so you provide government.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, that spending review profile would need to be updated by the next government. Clearly, we know there's an election is required before January 2025. So all eyes are on that to see how that would impact upon our plan. Now, the plan contains, as it always does, a number of proposals around cost pressures and efficiencies that we've got in plan. I'm happy to discuss those in further detail once, but I'll let Michelle run through the main elements of the numbers, and then we can open it for questions from there.
Okay, thank you very much. So as we've said, the report sets out the budget proposals as a basis for consultation, and they'll come back to executive on the 6th of February before going into council. It brings together updates from the autumn statement and the settlement from government. These were in line with previous indications, and there was no more money in there for specifically around the national living wage uplift, which was a new announcement, and that area was specifically created a significant pressure for us against our original assumptions with the MTFP we presented previously. We did receive some additional adult social care grants, but these were offset with reduction in service grants. So overall, no particular change in the funding that we were expecting from government. It set a referendum limit for council tax increases of no more than 5% increase, and that includes a 2% adult social care precept for county councils. As Andrew's just said, there was no indication to suggest any changes to the previous announcements around the slowing of growth in the government funding from 25/6, and that has been built into our medium-term plan that's been presented in the report. This presents some particular challenges around affordability of our services, where demand and cost continues to rise, and you'll see that in the appendices with the details of the cost pressures that are being put forward. So Table A on page 27 sets out our medium-term plan summary based on a 2.99% increase. The deficit position that this creates for 24/5 is 7 million, rising to 15 million over the 4-year period of the plan. And each of those deficits will be required to be met from reserves, requiring a £49 million worth of reserve usage over the medium-term period. So the revenue details for the budget for proposal for 2.99% increase is on Table B, and that includes cost pressures of 60.6 million and savings and additional income of 19.1 million. The pressures relate mainly to pay inflation and contract inflation and demand on services, particularly in the areas of social care and school transport. The report sets out an approach to business process improvement. That's part of the efficiency savings. And that's about trying to make our processes more efficient to avoid service reduction. Table E sets out the medium-term position based on different scenarios of council tax increase. So that includes an increase of 2.99%, 3.99% and 4.99%. Each of these require a use of reserves over the medium-term period, but that ranges from 49 million based on the 2.99% to 18 million at 4.99%. And just to note that each 1% of council tax generates around £3.7 million worth of funding each year, which goes into our base. Table F gives a breakdown of the reserves that we hold, with earmarked reserves being those that we can use to support budget deficits. The financial volatility reserve to support this is currently standing at 47 million. And just beyond the revenue programme, we've got the capital programme updates in the report as well. So the report basically sets out the use of contingency that we've been holding to add new schemes into the programme for next year, but no overall increase in the programme to ensure its continued affordability. So quite happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll start with a couple of questions. Well, first one is obviously one of the surprises in the Chancellor and the final settlement from government to the councils was obviously in the Chancellor statement, there was a surprise extra increase in the national living wage, which then obviously I just want to explain what the extra costs we anticipate will come to the council, but also what extra money the government made available, because normally they say that it's a cost which should be covered. I mean, there's supposed to be a protocol where if government puts extra costs on the councils that they then cover that. So first question is what was the impact of that? It's not what was expected, it was more than that. Can you just go through the history of it?
Yeah, so our planning in our medium-term plan up until the announcement was that we would have an increase in national living wage and inflation, and the grants that we got from government, the general grant was inflated in line with what we expected. We'd made an allowance for an increase in national living wage, and that mainly impacts on our adult social care contracts, but it came in and it's 30p more than what we was expecting, but that 30p more on the hourly rate for national living wage created a £6 million cost pressure that we hadn't planned for. So, and that wasn't covered at all in the grants that were brought forward from government. So that immediately put that.
So that nearly equates to 2% on the council.
Yes.
Nearly. I mean, obviously I think everybody appreciates that it's a very good thing that, you know, low paid workers, especially in the social sector, will be getting more money, but someone's got to pay for that. So that was one of the main additional, I mean, as always, we have the issues of cost pressures with adult care, homeschool transport, all that stuff. But this was a bit of a bolt from the blue, wasn't it?
It absolutely was, but it's probably worth noticing as well is that we've had a service provision grant that was originally put in a couple of years ago to do with the inflation pressures, and that was reduced and more money put into the social care. So overall, the effect for us was nil. So they kind of added it into the social care grant and then took it out.
Yeah, apart aside from that, it was also sort of
it was unexpected.
So just coming back to Andrew's point, and I'm looking at table E there, obviously, it's right to say that every 1% puts about £15 on the Band B property.
Yes, it does, yeah.
So if it's 1%, it's £15, and it's 5%, it's 5 times 15, it's £65. Okay, so in terms of what you said, Andrew, about the medium-term plan, and obviously we're talking about 26/7 already, 25, 26, on the assumption that you did say, well, obviously in the government's plans, obviously there is an assumed net reduction in funding. We'll get a bit more councils, but it won't be as much as inflation. So have you taken that into account in those figures?
Yeah, so
Right.
So the most recent data that we've got, so there was a spending review that was undertaken last year, I think, that covered to the end of the current parliamentary period, and it's been updated by the Office for Budget Responsibility at periodic points during the fiscal calendar. Now, I think the expectation was that public expenditure should rise in total by around about 1.1% each year after 25, 26 onwards. But we also know that a number of government departments are protected. So once those pockets of money are taken out around things like health, education, the amount left over is about 3.3 to 3.5% reduction for all unprotected departments. So we tried to reflect that in our figures from 25, 26 onwards, which amounts to somewhere in the region of around, I think it's about £6 to £9 million, isn't it, depending on the grants that we consider it to be.
So we could be sort of on that basis.
Yeah.
That works, that which we're solving.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, obviously it's difficult looking into the future, certainly with a new government, whatever colour it might be, will obviously, but I think that nationally, I think the view was that the savings were taken towards the end of that. So the pain, whoever comes in will be out to the general election. And I don't think either of the parties is going to be, I think we'll be in a very similar position, whoever is in around. So something we've got to plan for. Thank you. Any comments, questions, please? Anybody else? Yes, Mrs. Wood.
Apologies if I've missed this, but at 1.41, which is immediately below table A, there is reference to the district council's confirmation of the council tax bases and collection fund positions. When's that information? Is it out or when's it out?
So each year, as part of the returns to government, the district council have to do statutory returns based on their council tax figures and their business rates figures, and they have a responsibility to return those. They call it CTB1 and NDR forms to government at the end of January. And until they've done that, we don't have confirmation of what their collection fund rates are and their collection fund position and their tax-based position. So we get that information generally as the government gets it, which is at the end of January. So there is usually a little bit of tweaking based on that with the final recommendation.
So you make a prediction, you guess, well, an educated guess, and then sometimes we're lucky and it's more better than we thought, sometimes it's worse.
Yeah, so we build in generally a bit of growth in the tax base for council tax, and we've been quite prudent around business rates. But so we don't get the exact figures until the districts are required to send that back to government at the end of January.
So obviously in the report, Andy, there was obviously last year we put extra money into highways, 7 million. So can you just explain what the situation there is and what governments? Obviously there were announcements about the HS2 money. So what?
Yes, so the government on the back of cancelling HS2 released a paper called Network North, which identified where they were going to be reallocating funding, and initial announcements made on that have indicated that they're making commitments over either a 7 or a 9 year period, depending on which pot of money actually that relates to. Those announcements have resulted in some money being identified for this year and for next year, and that's obviously with a change of government there has to be a note of caution about whether those projections into the medium term will actually be committed to and fulfilled by future governments. So what that does is enable us to now sort of be programming our works accordingly with that guaranteed over the next 2 years additional income that's been identified.
So that next year, obviously the one-off 7 million drops out, is in the report, but that is not quite replaced. There is a bit of a shortfall, there's several million, couple of million or something.
Yeah, the money for next year I think is 5 million.
So 7 drops out, but it's replaced by 5 million, 5.9. Okay. Very good. Anybody else want to ask any questions or anything else? Seeing any, yes, Richard.
I just want almost to highlight the reduction in the reserves. I think it's quite important that we kind of are aware of what the reserves are going to fall to. The only thing is that the financial volatility doesn't sit in the table, does it? But that's almost our cushion, isn't it, rather than a statutory reserve.
Yeah.
So it always comes up as part of the consultation.
Yeah, so the table in the paper shows you the earmark reserves, which is the bits that we have choice about. The financial volatility is part of that. So that 100 million, the 47 is part of that. And other things in there are things like the development fund, where we put extra money into highways and things, and that's being drawn down. But effectively the 2.99% proposal reduces that to nil.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Mrs. Brown.
I just wanted to come in because although, we've gone through the budget with a fine-tooth comb, and thank you, Andrew and Michelle, for explaining this. But I do think we need to, feel sort of very lucky that we're not like some councils who will be making quite drastic decisions this year because of how we have managed our budgets during the year and years, to be honest. So, I think actually, you know, we're putting council tax up and that, but at the end of the day, you know, our services are all there. The roads are being repaired, adult care, you know, people are able to get funded to go in their homes or for their care and that, and children as well. So I do think actually there are difficult decisions to make, but I think we are in a very good position as a council to have options, because lots of councils won't have those options, will they?
No, many councils are not only having to put the council tax up 5%, also at the same time, substantial big savings. And I speak to, I see where colleagues are. We're all in the same position where we're all under pressure with some of these specific costs, but some councils, they're putting up to 5%. At the same time, there are frontline service cuts happening because they're struggling to balance their books. And as we're aware, there's councils not very far away from here where they are, the issue there, Section 114 notice, which is basically, it isn't really bankruptcy, but it is a big constraint. So we are in a better position, and considering Miles, the council tax is one of the lowest in the country, second lowest for county councils up there, and also our the grant system continues to be not in our favour. I think you know, we are doing really well, and that we compared to many others, and we've had to make some very difficult decisions, and we'll continue to do so. So, Councillor Daly.
Yes, just I wanted to echo the comments that Councillor Bradwell made and yourself, Leader. I think, you know, we're living in an uncertain time, quite clearly. We have no guarantees in terms of future funding. And obviously with the commitments that both our main political parties are making to certain expenditures going forward, it's probably my view that local government is not going to be favoured in the future, and we're going to be at the bottom of the end of the line, as they say. So I think, you know, as I said earlier, but building resilience is incredibly important in the organisation. The fact that this council is where it is down to the work that you've led, Leader, in terms of the budget process. We've built resilience over a decade now. You saw a lot of the challenges coming in local government caused by central government a long time ago, and we took action at the time, which was the right thing to do, to avoid the nightmare situation that many councils are now in across the country. So, you know, I think we have to be very pragmatic and cautious about the future. And I think, you know, council tax is always a controversial subject. But, you know, I think the higher the income this year to give us added resilience in the future is going to be critically important. You know, we can see the reserves, you know, going if we pursue a particular course of action. So we need to make sure that we are still protected as much as we can be, so we can make the decisions on behalf of our residents that they'll expect us to make. You know, they want us to deliver good services, and they want to be able to be an organisation that supports them at times of need. To do that, you have to have resources. So my view is that we probably need to go far higher council tax rate than is suggested in the report, and you know, leave that open to the discussion that then follows.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we started this process, I mean, I was hopeful that we would be bearing in mind the cost pressures that our residents are under in terms, as we know, it's been a very difficult period for many people, but and there was, you know, bluntly, I was hoping that we'll be able to go for a 3% increase, which is why we've got the range of options there. But quite bluntly, if the government lands us with a £6 million bill for national living wage, and doesn't fund it, I'm afraid we have no choice actually but to fill that, because that is an ongoing cost which will carry on every year. So it is in our what they call our base budget. So I think we have no alternative but to actually cover that, which means, you know, I think I shall propose that we go for a 5% council tax increase. And we've heard the figures there, the income it brings in and the cost will be to a bandy, but obviously varies on whatever band you are. But I would also, within that, we obviously talked earlier about the issue about the floods issues, which is related to highway. So I do think when we come to, we go out to consultation, but I think there should be an expectation that some of that extra resource which we will get from putting the council up higher should be looked at, and certainly in terms of what we can do, what more we could do in terms of protecting people in terms of their flooding and highways assets as well. So I think as part of we'll go out to consultation, but when we come to the budget next month, we'll probably have some thoughts about how we can have a long-term plan as to, we can't solve the flooding problem, but we can do more, I think, to try and alleviate those problems. And all of us who represent villages, I think we've all had issues where there's been problems with flooding, sometimes blocked drains and things where the ownership is questionable, shall we say. And I think people do look to us to try and help as best we can. And I think that's something we could do that as well. So my proposal would be to for a 5% council tax increase next year to go out to consultation. I just need a seconder now, please. So that is sorry, Councillor Davies seconded it. Are there any other proposals, please? Okay, so there is the one proposal. So I'll now put that to the vote. Those in favour of proposing 5% increase for consultation, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much for that. So that is that. Is there anything else we need to do on this, Andrew? Is that the only decision? So the recommendations there are that they're on what page on, but basically, effectively, that's what we agree with the recommendation plus a 5% increase in council tax. That's agreed. Thank you. So with that, I think that concludes the business of this meeting. So just thank you for your attendance and have a dry. You will have a dry home this week, unlike last week. Thanks for your attendance and have a good journey to your office.
Councillor Hill, just remind members that National Grid.
Oh, yeah.
To talk to